Hey guys, so the neurotransmitter we did was dopamine. Dopamine is a small molecule neurotransmitter with the chemical formula C8H11NO2, and it's made of the four most common elements in nature: carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen. Dopamine is found in a lot of the food we eat, but it can't cross the blood-brain barrier, so we have to create it ourselves in our bodies. It's only made in the neurons and the medulla of the adrenal glands, and it's synthesized from amino acids tyrosine or phenylalanine. It doesn't matter which one you start with, and then it's converted to L-DOPA by the amino acids respective hydroxylase, and then it's converted to dopamine by DOPA decarboxylase. And then, as you can see in the picture, dopamine is also a precursor for norepinephrine and epinephrine. Okay, so this is how it degrades. Dopamine is separated by monoamine oxidase and catechol-methyltransferase. It doesn't matter which one you start with again. The final product is always homovinylic acid, and that enters the bloodstream and is filtered out by the kidneys. Where is it found? There's only 40,000 dopaminergic neurons in the brain, which is not a lot compared to the massive neurons and glial cells in the brain. It's found in the substantia nigra and the ventral tegmental area, which are part of the midbrain, in the arcuate and paraventricular area, and the posterior hypothalamus, which are obviously in the hypothalamus, and then in the zona incerta, which is below the thalamus, and it's also found in the retina of your eye, which is the back part of your eye. What does it do? It helps with motor control, which is the movement of your muscles, motivation, which is motivation to do work, to eat, sleep, all that kind of stuff. And it also helps in arousal, which like wakes you up and makes you sleepy. And it is also involved in nausea when it's active in a certain part of the back of your brain. And it aids in cognitive control, which is, thinking and all that. And one of the main things it does is it is involved in reward. So when you do something and that's like good, there's a lot of dopamine released and it makes you feel good about it, and that also contributes to why people are addicted to drugs, because it makes you release a lot of dopamine, even though it has like other harmful effects on your body.
Now we're going to talk about receptors, and there are two different types of receptors. There's a D1 and a D2 receptor, family receptors, and the D1, like family receptors, they activate adenyl cyclase, which then increases the intracellular concentration of CAMP, and that would include like D1 and D5 are both D1 family-like receptors. However, D2 with the G protein, if it's activated, it inhibits the adenyl cyclase from making CAMP, and D2, D3, and D4 are all receptors in the D2 family. D2 family. So some diseases that are affected by dopamine, one is Parkinson's, and this is a result of a loss of dopaminergic cells in the substantia nigra. ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, occurs basically when there's an altered dopamine transmission, which is caused by faulty receptors or transmitters. Drug addiction is again like a reward-related dopamine problem. So when drugs become addictive because they increase the activity of the postsynaptic receptors and cause increased levels of synaptic dopamine. So basically, people feel rewarded when they have the drug, and that craving is just wanting more of that reward. So pain occurs as a result of a decreased level of dopamine, and yeah, and then nausea is the activation, or occurs as a result of the activation of D2 receptors in the chemoreceptor trigger zone, which is in the brainstem. And lastly, psychosis, they know is some sort of dopamine system dysfunction because drugs that reduce dopamine help to treat these patients, but they don't actually think that psychosis is just an increased level or is just a result of like having low dopamine levels. Um, and lastly, we have pharmacology. And so L-DOPA is converted to dopamine in the brain and in other parts of the body. So L-DOPA performs similar tasks as dopamine, but it can also cross the blood-brain barrier, unlike dopamine. And so this drug really helps people for long-term treatment for Parkinson's because it helps to increase, again, the amount of dopamine in the body. Then we have psychostimulants, which increases the amount of dopamine levels in the brain because they non-competitively inhibit the reuptake of dopamine in the synaptic cleft, which results in an increased level in the brain. And although increasing dopamine levels can be dangerous in patients with ADHD, it can really help their alertness and attention span. And lastly, we have antipsychotic drugs, and they decrease the amount of dopamine levels in the body, so therefore they're known as like major tranquilizers, and they're used to treat patients with schizophrenia. And the newer drugs don't actually directly affect dopamine receptors because there are too many negative side effects, but still relates to dopamine. And that is our problem for our project. I hope you thought it was dope.